Humans fight as if they have nothing left to lose, a dangerous trait for a species with so much to gain. The Alvarin, a proud and technologically advanced race, had never encountered an enemy they couldn't conquer. When their armada arrived on the outskirts of Earth's solar system, they expected humanity to fall just like the countless other civilizations they had subdued across the galaxy. From the bridge of the Alvarin flagship, Commander Verax gazed coldly at the holographic display, watching Earth's defenses fall apart with each passing moment. His race, known for their efficiency in warfare, had perfected the art of domination over millennia. To Verax, humans were a primitive species, fascinating in their defiance but ultimately doomed. Their ships were outdated, their strategy simple, and their resources stretched thin. Victory seemed assured. But humans had something the Alvarin had yet to understand, an unyielding determination. It was a trait that could make even the most desperate battle a prolonged and bloody struggle. And Commander Verax, in his arrogance, overlooked this one crucial detail. The mistake would prove costly. Captain Elias Stone stood on the bridge of the United Earth ship Valkyrie, the weight of leadership pressing down on him like 1,000 stars. Around him, alarms blared, lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the relentless assault of the Alvarin fleet. Despite the chaos, his mind remained sharp, focused on the battle unfolding in the cold void of space. The Valkyrie, a symbol of humanity's resolve, was a heavily armed warship designed to withstand punishment. Yet even its reinforced hull couldn't hold out much longer. Stone's gaze locked on the holographic map of the battlefield, where a sea of red dots representing Alvarin ships encircled the small human fleet. The noose was tightening, and they were running out of time. "Sir, shields are down to 20%. We've got a whole breach in Sector 7, a young lieutenant called out from across the bridge, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms. Stone didn't flinch. His fingers tightened around the rail in front of him, but his voice remained steady. "Hold the line. Keep our ships together. Tell the Viper to shift to intercept the incoming cruisers." Sweat trickled down his brow, but he couldn't allow himself the luxury of fear. His crew needed him to be the rock in the storm, the one thing that wouldn't break. Even as their situation grew more desperate by the second, Stone knew that panicking wouldn't save them. They had to outlast the Alvarin, no matter the cost. The Viper, one of the smaller, more agile ships in the fleet, broke formation and darted between two massive Alvarin cruisers. It was a maneuver born of desperation, reckless, dangerous, but necessary. The move bought the Valkyrie a brief reprieve, a small window to strike back. "Fire plasma cannons, now!" Stone ordered, his voice carrying over the din. Twin beams of searing blue plasma erupted from the Valkyrie's cannons, cutting through the blackness of space and slamming into an Alvarin frigate. The enemy ship shuddered under the impact, its hull buckling and disintegrating in a brilliant explosion. It was a satisfying victory, but Stone knew it was far from enough. The Alvarin fleet was vast, a seemingly endless wave of ships that outnumbered humanity's forces 10 to 1. The destruction of a single ship was a drop in the ocean. "Captain, this is suicide," Major Wells, his second-in-command, barked from across the bridge, his face pale with the grim reality of their situation. "We're outgunned, outmaneuvered. We can't win this." "We don't have to win," Stone replied, his voice low but filled with a fierce determination. "We just need to survive long enough to make them bleed." His words were cold, calculated, and delivered with the kind of confidence only a seasoned soldier could muster. Stone wasn't interested in glory or victory. He was focused on survival, on buying enough time for Earth to mount a proper defense. Every second they held out was a second closer to reinforcements, a second closer to finding a way to turn the tide. "All remaining ships, focus fire on their lead vessel," Stone ordered, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "If we take out their command ship, they'll hesitate." The bridge was a whirlwind of activity as orders flew across the room. The crew, though terrified, moved with precision. They had trained for this moment, years of preparation boiled down to these critical seconds. Targeting systems were recalibrated, power was rerouted to the weapons, and damaged sections of the ship were sealed off to contain the breaches. Outside, the battle raged on, a symphony of destruction playing out across the stars. The human fleet was falling apart. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes, their fiery deaths casting long shadows across the void. But for every human vessel that fell, the Alvarin paid a steep price. The Valkyrie had become a symbol of defiance, and its crew refused to go quietly into the night. "Target acquired, sir," the weapons officer shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. "Fire everything we've got," Stone commanded, his eyes narrowing as he watched the Alvarin command ship loom large on the display. Missiles, plasma beams, and rail guns unleashed their fury, a torrent of firepower aimed directly at the heart of the Alvarin fleet. The enemy vessel, a massive behemoth of a ship, shuddered under the relentless assault. Fires erupted along its hull as system after system failed, the once impenetrable defenses buckling under the onslaught. "They're taking heavy damage," someone shouted, hope creeping into their voice for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Stone leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the console. "Send the signal. All ships, focus fire now." The remaining human ships, battered and broken though they were, rallied in response. They poured everything they had into the Alvarin command ship, concentrating their firepower in a last-ditch effort to bring it down. One by one, the systems aboard the human ships began to overload, their power reserves drained from the sustained assault. But they kept firing, refusing to give up even as their ships groaned under the strain. And then, with a deafening roar that reverberated through the void, the Alvarin flagship exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the battlefield. For a brief moment, the war paused. The Alvarin fleet, stunned by the loss of their leader, hesitated. Their once coordinated assault faltered, leaving gaps in their formation. "Full retreat! All ships, pull back!" Stone ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. The surviving human vessels, what few remained, broke away from the battle, slipping through the cracks in the Alvarin formation. They left behind a field of wreckage and fire, but against all odds, they had survived. Earth's victory, if it could be called that, came at an immense cost. The Alvarin had been driven back, but humanity's defenses were shattered. Earth lay in ruins, its once thriving cities reduced to smoking craters, its colonies barely holding on. The fleet that had once stood as humanity's shield was now little more than a collection of broken, battered ships, their numbers decimated in the fight. Captain Elias Stone stood before the Council of the Terran Alliance, a gathering of Earth's political elite, in a dark, imposing chamber that seemed to swallow the light. He wore his battle-worn uniform, the creases barely concealing the scars of war etched into his face. His eyes, once bright with determination, now carried the weight of 1,000 lost lives. "You're telling us you let them go?" Chancellor Vance, a tall, imposing figure with a voice like thunder, questioned from his seat at the head of the council. His disbelief was palpable, cutting through the tense atmosphere like a blade. "After all that, you didn't finish them off?" Stone stood firm, his hands clasped behind his back. "We didn't have the strength," he replied, his voice calm but resolute. "Our fleet was on the verge of collapse. If we had pressed the attack, we would have been wiped out." Chancellor Vance shook his head, pacing before the council with growing frustration. "The Alvarin will be back," he warned, his voice rising with each word. "They always come back. And next time, we might not be so lucky." Stone's jaw clenched. He had faced the Alvarin ships head-on. He had seen their strength, their efficiency. They weren't just stronger, they were smarter, more organized. But here he was, standing before a room full of politicians who had never seen battle, defending his decisions as if they could ever truly understand the horrors he had witnessed. "They will come back," Stone agreed, his voice low but firm. "But we won't be the same force they faced before. We have time now. Time to rebuild. Time to prepare." "Time for what, exactly?" a sharp voice interjected from the back of the chamber. It was Councilor Navarre, a seasoned politician with a sharp tongue and an even sharper mind. "More wars? More losses?" Stone met her gaze without flinching. "Time to evolve." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the council like a storm cloud. He wasn't just talking about rebuilding ships or reinforcing defenses. Stone understood what was at stake in a way the council did not. The Alvarin had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Neither would Earth. The next few years were a blur of activity. Earth and its colonies threw every resource they had into the war effort, rebuilding their shattered fleet and developing new technologies to counter the Alvran threat. Factories churned out warships, weapons, and armor at a staggering rate. Scientists worked tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge in an attempt to close the technological gap between themselves and their alien adversaries. Captain Stone was at the center of it all. His reputation had grown in the aftermath of the battle, and he was quickly elevated to the position of Fleet Admiral, a title that weighed heavily on his shoulders. Every decision he made now could mean the difference between survival and extinction for the human race. He spent most of his days in meetings with military leaders, engineers, and politicians, but his mind was always on the next battle. Stone knew that the Alvran weren't idle. They were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready. The United Earth ship Revenant was the crown jewel of this new fleet, a symbol of humanity's resilience and ingenuity. Built from the remains of the old fleet, it was faster, deadlier, and bristling with weaponry humanity had only dreamed of before the war. The Revenant was equipped with advanced shielding technology, experimental energy weapons, and a state-of-the-art cloaking device that allowed it to slip past enemy defenses undetected. Captain Stone, now Fleet Admiral, stood on the bridge of the Revenant, gazing out at the stars. His crew worked quietly around him, their movements efficient and precise. The calm before the storm. "All systems are green, Admiral," Major Wells reported from the console beside him. Wells had served under Stone during the first Alvran assault, and their bond had only grown stronger in the years since. They had seen more than their share of battles together, and both men knew what was coming next. "Good," Stone replied, his voice steady. "Initiate the jump." The hum of the ship's engines deepened, and the stars outside the viewport began to blur as the Revenant and its fleet of 15 ships entered hyperspace. Their destination, the Alvran homeworld, Terrasis. The mission was simple: strike at the heart of the enemy before they could launch another invasion. It was a bold, dangerous plan, but Stone knew it was their only chance to win the war. When the fleet emerged from hyperspace, the Alvran homeworld loomed large before them, a dark and foreboding planet surrounded by a network of orbital defenses. The Alvran ships scrambled to respond to the sudden appearance of the human fleet, but they were too slow. Stone's fleet had timed their attack perfectly, bypassing the bulk of the Alvran defenses and appearing on their doorstep before they had time to react. "Targets locked," Wells reported, his voice tense but controlled. Stone's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of the enemy fleet forming up ahead of them. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. "All ships, engage at will." The Revenant launched a barrage of missiles and plasma beams, followed closely by the other ships in the fleet. The Alvran ships, caught off guard, scrambled to mount a defense, but their formation was disorganized. Stone's fleet pressed the attack, cutting through the enemy lines with ruthless efficiency. "We're within range of their planetary defenses," Wells reported, his voice tight with anticipation. "Launch the payload," Stone ordered. The Revenant unleashed a wave of missiles toward the surface of Terrasis. Explosions rippled across the planet as the Alvran defense grid collapsed under the assault. The human fleet moved with precision, picking off enemy ships one by one as they pressed their advantage. Terrasis, once the heart of the Alvran Empire, was now a burning husk. The humans had won. Despite their victory, there was no celebration aboard the Revenant. The bridge was eerily quiet as the crew processed the magnitude of what they had just done. Captain Stone stood at the viewport, staring out at the wreckage of the Alvran fleet. His expression was unreadable, his thoughts hidden behind the stoic mask he had worn for years. "It's over," Wells said quietly, breaking the silence. Stone shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving the stars. "No," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's just beginning." Humanity had risen to claim its place among the stars, but the galaxy had yet to realize the true danger they posed. The Alvran had been the first to underestimate them, but they wouldn't be the last. As the Revenant and its fleet turned away from the burning remains of the Alvran homeworld, the future of the galaxy was forever changed. Humanity had survived. Now, they would thrive.